The government had been tracking our dreams all along, and Sarah discovered the proof buried in her late father's classified files. She stood frozen in her childhood home's attic, hands trembling as she held the documents revealing decades of covert neural monitoring through household electronics. Everything she thought she knew about privacy and freedom collapsed in that moment. Her father hadn't been paranoid after all. If these files became public, she'd become a target for powerful people who'd do anything to keep this secret. But if she stayed silent, millions would continue living in an invisible prison of surveillance. What terrified her most wasn't the revelation itself, but the question burning through her mind: if they could monitor dreams, what else could they control? Sarah clutched the papers to her chest, tears streaming down her face as she realized her father had died trying to expose this truth. His accident, 6 months ago, suddenly made perfect sense. The weight of this knowledge crushed her. She was now the only person alive who could finish what he started, but doing so might cost everything. Sarah carefully photographed each document before returning them exactly as she found them. The government program, codenamed Morpheus Protocol, had begun as experimental technology in 2015, but expanded rapidly during the pandemic when more people brought smart devices into their bedrooms. The technology used subtle electromagnetic frequencies to map brain activity during REM sleep, creating a massive database of subconscious patterns. Her father, a former intelligence analyst, had discovered the program accidentally while investigating data anomalies. She needed someone she could trust completely. Despite their complicated history, only one person came to mind: James, her ex-fiancé, who now worked as an investigative journalist. Their relationship had ended when her father's increasingly paranoid behavior drove a wedge between them. James had wanted her to get her father psychological help, but she had defended him fiercely. The irony wasn't lost on her now. With shaking hands, she texted him, "You were wrong about Dad. I need to see you. It's urgent." His response came immediately. "Where?" They met at their old spot, a quiet corner of Riverside Park, where the trees provided cover from prying eyes and surveillance cameras. When James saw her face, his professional skepticism melted into concern. "What happened?" he asked, reaching for her hand instinctively. Sarah hesitated, suddenly aware that sharing this information would pull him into danger too. But as she looked into his eyes, she realized she'd already made her decision by coming here. "They killed my father," she whispered, and everything he believed was true. As Sarah showed James the photos, his expression shifted from disbelief to horror. "This can't be real," he muttered, but she could see he knew it was. The documentation was meticulous, including internal memos discussing dream harvesting quotas and subconscious pattern analysis. One memo specifically mentioned using the technology to identify potential dissidents before they consciously formed anti-government thoughts. "If this is authentic," James said slowly, "it's the biggest violation of civil liberties in history." "It gets worse," Sarah said, scrolling to the final documents. "They're planning to upgrade the system next month. Something called Morpheus 2.0 that doesn't just monitor dreams, but can influence them." She watched James process this information, his journalist's mind already connecting dots. "We need to go public with this," he said finally, "but we need more proof, something irrefutable." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. "There's only one place to get that," she replied. "We need to break into Nexus Technologies." Nexus Technologies was the private contractor that had developed the Morpheus Protocol. According to her father's notes, their headquarters contained a secure server room with the complete program data. Breaking in would be nearly impossible and absolutely illegal. "There has to be another way," James argued, but Sarah shook her head. "Dad tried the legal routes. Look where it got him." The unspoken question hung between them. Were they willing to risk everything for this truth? Just as James opened his mouth to respond, Sarah's phone buzzed with a news alert. Her blood ran cold as she read the headline, "Fire Destroys Home of Late Government Analyst." Her house with all the original documents was gone. "They know," she whispered, meeting James's eyes. "They know I found it." In that moment, their decision was made for them. There was no going back now. What followed was a desperate race against time. Using James's press credentials and Sarah's knowledge of her father's work, they began gathering evidence and allies. Dr. Elinor Chen, a neuroscientist who had consulted on the early stages of the project before realizing its true purpose, agreed to help them. "I've been waiting for someone to expose this," she told them in her university office, blinds drawn tight, "but you need to understand these people will stop at nothing to protect this program." With Dr. Chen's help, they identified a potential weakness in Nexus Technologies' security system. Once a month, the company performed a complete system backup that required temporarily disabling certain security protocols. The next backup was scheduled for 3 days later. They had a narrow window to act. Sarah spent those days memorizing building layouts, while James called in favors from trusted contacts to secure the equipment they would need. The night before their planned infiltration, Sarah and James found themselves alone in a safe house Dr. Chen had arranged. The tension of the past week, the shared danger, and their unresolved history created an undeniable current between them. "I never stopped loving you," James admitted quietly as they sat reviewing their plans one final time. "I just couldn't understand why you chose your father's delusions over our future." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "And I never stopped loving you," she whispered. "I just couldn't abandon him when everyone else had." Their hands found each other across the table, a bridge across years of misunderstanding. That night, holding each other close, they found comfort in a connection that transcended their circumstances. "Whatever happens tomorrow," James murmured against her hair, "finding you again has been worth it." Sarah pressed closer, memorizing the feeling of safety in his arms, knowing it might be the last moment of peace they would know. "We're going to finish what my father started," she promised together. The infiltration began smoothly, too smoothly. Using Dr. Chen's access codes and the temporary security gap, they made it to the server room without detection. Sarah's hands flew across the keyboard, following her father's notes to locate the Morpheus files. "I'm in," she breathed, watching as thousands of classified documents appeared on the screen. James connected their secure drive, and the download began. 90 seconds to completion. At 60 seconds, the first alarm sounded. "Someone's coming," James hissed, positioning himself by the door. Sarah watched the progress bar crawling forward. 70%, 75%. The sound of footsteps grew louder. "Sarah, we need to go," James urged. "Not without the files," she insisted. 85%, 90%. The footsteps stopped outside the door. 95%. The handle turned. 100%. "Got it." Sarah yanked the drive free just as the door burst open. What happened next would haunt Sarah's nightmares for years to come. Security forces flooded the room, weapons drawn. In the chaos, James pushed her toward the emergency exit, placing himself between her and the guards. "Run," he shouted, and she did, clutching the drive that contained the truth. The last thing she saw was James being forced to his knees, hands behind his head. The sound of the door slamming shut behind her echoed like a gunshot. For 3 days, Sarah lived in a fog of fear and grief, moving between safe houses, waiting for news of James. The drive contained everything irrefutable proof of the program, its scope, and its violations, but the cost seemed too high. On the 4th day, Dr. Chen arrived with a newspaper. James was alive, but being held on charges of espionage. His face looked bruised in the grainy photo. "They're making an example of him," Dr. Chen explained gently. "They don't know about you or the drive yet." Sarah made her decision. Working with Dr. Chen and a small network of trusted journalists, they prepared the files for release. The evidence was overwhelming. Millions of citizens had their most private thoughts monitored without consent or knowledge. The planned upgrade would have allowed direct manipulation of dreams to influence behavior and decision-making. They scheduled simultaneous releases across multiple platforms, ensuring the information couldn't be suppressed. The night before the release, Sarah recorded a video explaining everything, including her father's death and James's imprisonment. Looking directly into the camera, she spoke with quiet determination. For years, those in power have violated our most fundamental right to privacy. They've reached into our minds while we sleep, harvesting our dreams and fears. Tomorrow, we reclaim our freedom. Tomorrow, we wake up. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Protests erupted in major cities. Government officials scrambled to deny, then damage, control, then resign. Nexus Technologies stock collapsed. Congressional hearings were announced. And most importantly, James was released. The government couldn't maintain the espionage charges without revealing the very program they were trying to hide. Their reunion at the courthouse steps was captured by dozens of cameras, becoming the defining image of what the media called the awakening. Sarah ran into James's arms, both of them crying openly as they held each other. "You did it." He whispered against her hair. "We did it." She corrected him, "All of us." Over his shoulder, she could see Dr. Chen smiling through tears, surrounded by journalists clamoring for statements. In the months that followed, Sarah and James worked tirelessly with privacy advocates to ensure the dismantling of not just the Morpheus Protocol, but all similar surveillance programs. Her father was posthumously recognized for his courage, his name cleared of the paranoid conspiracy theorist, a label that had followed him to his grave. Sarah often thought about how he would have felt, seeing his daughter complete his mission. 1 year after the revelation, on the anniversary of what was now called Dream Day, Sarah and James stood hand in hand at a memorial dedicated to all those who had fought for privacy rights. "I never thought we'd be here," Sarah admitted, looking out at the peaceful crowd gathered in the park. "I thought we'd either be dead or in hiding." James squeezed her hand. "Your father would be proud," he said softly, "not just of what you revealed, but of what you've built since." That night, for the first time in years, Sarah slept without fear, knowing her dreams were truly her own. The journey had cost so much her father, nearly James, their sense of security, but it had given back something precious, truth. And in that truth, millions had found the courage to demand better from those in power. If this story of courage and the fight for privacy moved you, remember that vigilance is our shared responsibility. Every like and subscription helps spread awareness about the importance of protecting our fundamental rights. The most powerful conspiracies aren't the ones we imagine, they're the ones hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to speak truth to power. Be that person. The world needs more truth, tellers like Sarah and James, more people willing to stand up for what's right, even when it costs everything.